Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I first want to say thank you to everyone who decided to come on out to us to this town hall event tonight. We have the Ward 6 town hall meeting tonight. Before I get started, I wanted to say thank you to certain people, our Ward 6 residents who decided to join us. We definitely much appreciate the time and effort you took out tonight. Also, I want to thank the cabinet members who decided to join with us tonight. We also appreciate it. And most importantly, I want to say thank you to the mayor for him deciding to do this presentation across the city. Last, we want to thank our co-hosts. We have 4 constituency groups in Ward 6 decided to co-host the event with us tonight. We have ANC 6A, ANC 6B, ANC 6C, and also the Mount Vernon Square Neighborhood Association. So let me just go through the order for tonight's event. The first thing we'll do, I'll turn over the mic to the mayor, let him do his presentation for the Ward 6 Town Hall. The next thing I'll do, we'll conclude with a question and answer from any cabinet members, any residents, or any constituents that are here. And then the last thing we'll do, give a round of warm welcome for anyone else who has any comments or questions. Okay? So I'll turn over the mic to the mayor and let him begin. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for being out tonight. This is the third of our town hall meetings in which we do what we've done each of the last several years, and that is to present the budget as it has been transmitted to the council. For the most part, the presentation is the same from one ward to the next, although there are a couple of slides in which we talk specifically about things that are unique to that particular ward. In this instance, it would be, of course, Ward 6. But before we start the presentation, I want to introduce someone. He's joining us at these events. Got an armload of stuff over there, don't you, Jeff? He is our relatively new, I don't know when you stop being new. We'll just call you new, okay? He is our new Chief Financial Officer, having succeeded Dr. Natwar Gandhi, who did an extraordinary job for 13 years as the CFO and worked in the financial apparatus of the District of Columbia for 16 years. Jeff comes to us after a very, very storied career in Phoenix, Arizona. Great reputation among many people across the nation, and we're delighted to have him as our Chief Financial Officer. So please join me in welcoming Jeff DeWitt.
Thank you, Mayor, and it's a privilege to be here tonight. I really am enjoying this particular budget hearing because I live a couple blocks over, so I can walk right home after this is over with. So that's very nice. I have, as the mayor said, I come from Phoenix, Arizona, and in Phoenix, Arizona, I was the chief financial officer there, and went through some pretty incredible experiences there, where the city lost half of its property tax base during the Great Recession. Where if you bought a home there, you probably lost half the value. You bought it, it doubled, you lost it, and you're back about where you were 10 years ago. So I've been through that experience. I have been here since January 2nd. Got the opportunity to spend some time with Dr. Gandhi before he retired, and went off to India to do poetry. I'm not a poet, so I'm not going to be doing that kind of thing. But I have really enjoyed my time here. I've got through my first winter. After spending, again, 25 years in Phoenix, Arizona, where I believe it's close to 100 today. So I'm now sending my friend texts about the beautiful weather here, where they were sending me really nasty texts about 80-degree weather when it was 11 degrees here. But I live nearby here. I'm really enjoying it, enjoying D.C., love living here. You're going to see the mayor's presentation talk about things such as we have some of the best bond ratings we've ever had. We have some of the best reserves we've had, which has given opportunities to do things like he's going to talk about, like affordable housing and school programs like this school. I walk by this quite regularly when I'm out walking around, and all the wonderful things have been done here and all the other schools. So you're going to see him talk about all the opportunities that are available because our financial condition is so good in the district, and I'm very, very fortunate to walk into a position like this after Dr. Gandhi and be able to take over as the CFO of a wonderful capital city and in a wonderful financial position, and we'll do everything to keep it there. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you all in the future, and I really, really love being here. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you very much. This is kind of a weird week for me in one respect, and that is, you mentioned the school. I went to elementary school in this place. And I swear, you come in here and it looks so huge. You know, when I was about that big, right? I went from kindergarten through the 6th grade in this school, and then tomorrow evening we're having a sustainability presentation on how we're doing with that. We're having at Langley, which is the junior high school I went to. And then the next day, we have a report on our sustainability program in the District of Columbia, the first-year report at Dunbar High School, where I went to high school. And I had nothing to do with selecting any of these buildings, so it is pure, honestly, it is pure coincidence. So anyway, I'll get to see all those places where I went to school. Got to figure out where to have, something at George Washington University in order to be able to really top it off. Anyway, the theme of our budget this year is keeping promises, and that's exactly what we've tried to do over the last several years. And that is, we came in the door promising to do certain things, and we worked hard to try to be able to do that. One of the things that we've tried to do is to maintain fiscal responsibility. For example, we have a structurally sound budget, a budget that when we say structurally sound, we mean that we're not spending more money than has come in the door. And we're not using anything from the reserves in order to be able to balance our budget. We have maintained the 12% debt cap, which is an important thing to do, especially for the rating agencies in New York. And there are no new taxes and no new fees in this budget. In the interest of continuing the fiscal responsibility that I've alluded to, this shows you a view over the last 21 years of the district's bank account. Back in the early to mid-90s, you can see that we were in a very difficult situation. We had, not only did we have nothing, but we actually owed people $518 million. And then gradually, when Anthony Williams was the mayor, we gradually worked our way out of it and got all the way up by 2006 to having $1.5 billion in the bank. And then you see a big dip. After that, it goes down. And then we came in 2011, and it started to go back up again. We now have in the bank the largest bank account that we've ever had in the history of the District of Columbia, and that is $1.75 billion. And I think, frankly, at the rate we're going, we may be fortunate enough to have close to $2 billion by the end of the current fiscal year, which would be wonderful news for everybody. We inherited a situation that was quite challenging, to say the least, and we worked each year to try to close those gaps. When we came in the door, the first budget that I was able to do of my first budget, we had a projected gap. That is, the gap being, if you continue to do everything that you've done the previous year, here's what the funding gap will be in order for you to be able to balance the budget. That was $322 million. By the following year, we had reduced that down to $172 million. And by 14, we had reduced that down to $79.3 million. And going into this year's budget, we had a gap of only $2.7 million, which is virtually nothing given the size of the budget that we have in the District of Columbia. So we're happy with where we are at this stage, and it gave us quite a cushion to be able to go into planning this year's budget. Just by way of summary, the local funds, which means the money that we raise ourselves, our approved budget on the local end is $6.35 billion. You'll see the total budget, which includes federal funds, funds from everywhere. You'll see that shortly. We have baseline expenditures, which again is that budget that we would have to put in place in order to be able to maintain doing what we did in fiscal year 14. The current services funding level, which is the budget, the CSFL budget, would be $6.48 billion. And there's certain adjustments that we have to make to that. And then the overall budget includes a 4.5% increase over the 14 approved budget. So the total of the 15 budget is projected to be $6.79 billion on the local end. That is, local meaning money that comes from our property taxes, money that comes from our income taxes, and money that comes from the sales taxes of the District of Columbia. That's the big three in the city. And there are lots of other federal funds, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a second, but that's the lion's share of the money we get from the local end. Included in that $6.79 billion is new policy decisions or new efforts, new stuff that we're getting underway of $139 million. The budget that we're projecting for 15 is 2.3% higher than the current year budget. And then just by comparison, I don't know, you can make whatever comparison you want out of this, and that is that we have a budget, a population growth of 2.1% in the District of Columbia during this comparable period. Now, the 15 budget at a glance, how do we spend the money? The lion's share of the money, in fact, the pattern hasn't changed much. We're spending about 40% of the money on human services. That's $4.34 billion, and a huge chunk of that is being spent on health care, and particularly the Medicaid program, which is probably about $3 billion, including the federal money that we get for Medicaid. The second largest area is is public education, and that's about $2 billion. So when you put human services together with public education, you have about 60% of the District of Columbia budget. And much of that, of course, is spent on staffing, as you might imagine, given the fact that so much of that is labor intensive. So 60% being spent on human services and 40% being spent on public education, or around $6 billion and $2 billion in public education. And then the other 40% is spread over a number of areas, like public safety, $1 billion, public works, $720 million, economic development, which is probably the smallest of those budgets, $470 million, and I swear we get the best return imaginable on that money. For those of you who didn't see, we just made an announcement today that CBS Radio is moving its Mid-Atlantic headquarters to the District of Columbia, down on Half Street, in the 1000 block, I think it's 1000 block of Half Street, southeast, which is just north of the ballpark. There will be 6 stations that will be located there. They will have a performance venue, as they call it, so that when people walk by, they will be able to see folks actually at work broadcasting in one way or the other. The announcement was made today, and they will actually be up and operating by July. For those of you who want to go down and see what is going on there, it'll be a really nice experience to see. The money, again, 70% of our budget comes from our local funds, the big three that I mentioned before. And then in addition to that, about a little over $2 billion, 28.9% from federal funds, $2 billion of which is from Medicaid, and then the rest of it from various federal grants and federal payments, much of which is for education. The 15 budget has 4 pillars in it. And the first pillar is continuing to invest in public education, which I don't think there's any argument from anybody about the importance of that. We're proposing to invest $116 million additional in educational support, $112 million of which will go to the D.C. public schools and the public charter schools. A lot of people don't realize that every time we invest a dollar into the D.C. public schools, we have to invest a comparable dollar into the public charter schools. One of the things that we did this year was conduct what's called an adequacy study to try to determine what additional investments needed to be made in order to get us to the point where we could feel comfortable that we were adequately serving and investing in public education in the District of Columbia. That is $60 million of the $112 million alone. $4.2 million is yet another investment in early childhood education. We are proposing to invest additional money into our infant and toddler programs. We now have, I think, the most robust early childhood education program in America in terms of pre-K3 and pre-K4. We have 70% of our children now who are enrolled in 3-year-olds who are now enrolled in all-day, everyday programs, classrooms, and then 92% of our 4-year-olds are enrolled in school all day, every day. But we're trying to now improve those programs for those children who are at birth up to 3 years of age. The children who are anywhere from a month old through a year old, through 2 years old, on their way to being in pre-K 3. So this will give us a chance to add more slots, and it will give us a chance to improve the quality of what we do in the infant and toddler programs. We're adding a new facilities increase for facilities to the public charter schools. They will get an increase of, they get $3,000 now, so they'll get something around $3,100 for each of their students, which will total about $2.8 million. And then, as you will see, you'll see more details shortly, $1.6 billion in our capital improvement program for schools overall. And then we expect, which is really exciting news, we expect the enrollment in our public schools to grow over the next year to almost 87,000 students, which will be the highest number of students that we've had in public education in 25 years in the District of Columbia. And that growth is now taking place in both charter schools as well as D.C. public schools. There was a point when there was growth taking place in the charter schools, but it was at the sacrifice of the D.C. public schools. So if we had 10 students increase in public charter schools, we were losing 11 or 12 in D.C. public schools. That has been stemmed. Now you're seeing growth in both sectors, and that's how we get to almost 87,000 students projected for next year. We also are adding $5 million for school nurses. We are adding to our middle schools that will allow every child in the middle school to be able to have algebra, a foreign language, art, physical education, and music available to them. And there will be 9 career and technical education academies that will be opening. Last August, we started the planning to bring back what used to be called vocational education because it was systematically eliminated from our schools, despite the fact that there was an obvious need. What was needed was an overhaul of what was then called vocational education rather than simply being eliminated from the schools. So we're bringing it back. There will be 9 academies in our high schools, including D.C. public schools and charter schools, and the concentration will be in hospitality, will be in construction, and also will be in information technology. Why those 3? Because we know that jobs are being created in those areas. So young people will be able to be equipped to go to work if they choose to after they finish a high school with a concentration in these areas, or go on to college and continue to be able to prepare themselves for careers in those areas. We also have $175,000 in the budget, which means that every child who's in the 11th grade or 12th grade will not have to pay for the SAT test. The city will pay for that because we recognize the importance of being able to fund such services. We're opening a new youth re-engagement center, which will help with truancy. We're putting another $1 million into truancy prevention. $400,000 into a program that's working very well at the D.C. Public Library. That's the Sing, Talk, and Read program, and an inflation adjustment of $1.3 million for the University of the District of Columbia. And there's another increase for the community college, but I'll come back to that shortly. In addition to that, we are investing, as I indicated, we're investing In the high schools, $173.8 million, $20.4 million in our middle schools, and elementary schools, $115.7 million, for a total, when you put all those together, of $404 million being invested in school modernization. In terms of Ward 6, there's several schools that will get investments. One is Golding, $1.4 million. Payne Elementary School, that will get $18.4 million. Shaw, that will get $4.1 million as a beginning process. Stewart Hobson, almost $20 million. Van Ness, which will be reopening, that's been promised for a while, it will be reopening, $15 million. And then Watkins Elementary School, $1.5 million. The second pillar is affordable housing. And that is probably one of the greatest needs that we have right now in the District of Columbia. And that is, how do we keep the city, because we're hot. A lot of people want to be here. The population is increasing by 1,100 to 1,200 people every month. Our population is now 647,000 people, which again is the largest population that we've had in many years in the District of Columbia. And while that's happening, there are lots of people who are professionals, young professionals moving into the city, and they are basically bidding up the price of housing in the city. It is going through, no pun intended, it is going through the roof, the cost of housing. So we put $187 million into the budget for the current year, and now we're proposing to put another $100 million in, which will give us a total of $287 million being invested in housing. $78.5 million of that will be generated through the Housing Production Trust Fund. $8.5 million will come from from a piece of legislation that was authored and sponsored by Councilmember Anita Bonds that will give relief to our seniors. The way it works is that if a person is 70 years of age or older, doesn't have an adjusted gross income of more than $60,000 a year, and has owned a home for 20 years in the District of Columbia consecutively, you will not have to pay any more property taxes for the duration in the District of Columbia, which is a good thing. We are committed to ending homelessness among veterans. We're putting $4.7 million. We probably have gotten, as best we can estimate, we've probably gotten about half of the veterans off the streets at this stage. We think there's another 250 to 300 homeless veterans in the District of Columbia, and the goal of this $4.7 million is to be able to put money into housing so veterans can get off the street. It's really shameful that somebody would go off and serve their country and have to come home to no job and no place to live. That is not one of the things that America ought to be proud of. We're putting money into local rent supplement vouchers, $3 million for individuals and families, and $1 million for seniors. And then $1.3 million will go into a program, what do we call it, Eric? The Heat and Eat program?
Thank you, Mayor. The Heat and Eat program, the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, this is money where a senior or a resident may have trouble paying the electric bill, and this allows funding to come in. It also allows the district to maximize federal funding. We were at risk of losing federal funds, but by putting this additional money in the budget, the mayor has not only preserved that federal funding that comes in at a 20-to-1 match, but has also assured that we've got enough money in there for both of these programs, the matching funds for the food assistance and the money for the low-income home energy assistance. So he's been able to fund both in this budget with the funding increase that he provided.
I think if we put up, $1, that will guarantee all federal benefits for everybody who, $1 per person, right? Yeah, that will guarantee all federal benefits to people who otherwise would be eligible. One of the things that we've committed ourselves to, and you may have heard something about this last week, is to get 500 families out of shelter within the next 100 days. And interestingly enough, this is not so much a money issue as it is how we use the money in the first place. We have a commitment to take money that we're spending on homeless services at this stage and use that money to be able to invest in the rapid rehousing program, the emergency rental assistance program, that would allow people then to move out of shelter and move into permanent housing situations. We have around 640, 650 families at present in shelter. And this will allow us, obviously, if we're successful, to get most of these families out between now and the end of June, which is an important thing to be able to do. We're putting money into the HPAP program, which is for first-time home buyers, a new home ownership campaign in Wards 7 and 8, and also $250,000 to create an emergency housing funding campaign being operated out of the Office of the Tenant Advocate. The third pillar of the four is to encourage economic and workforce development, or further encourage it. First of all, we're proposing to invest $4.2 million into adult job training in the District of Columbia. $2.5 million, I mentioned earlier, more money going into the community college. This will allow us to increase our workforce development in the community college. Actually, the community college now has more students than does the University of the District of Columbia's four-year program. And what we're doing is trying to prepare people who may not want to go even for a full 2 years, to prepare them for a job beyond high school. We had a graduation of the community college back in January at H.D. Woodson High School, and there were 929 people who graduated from the community college at that one ceremony, that one celebration. And so we know that this has an important role to play. In fact, we really are at the stage now where we think we have a full workforce development system with the community college, with the career academies that I talked about earlier, with the Workforce Investment Council, with the workforce intermediaries, and of course the Department of Employment Services and the work that they do. We also are proud of our One City business portal. This came out of our regulatory reform task force. We were talking about that earlier today. This will be when it's done, and we expect to have it done this year, right? We expect to have it done this year. I see we got DCRA on the bookends over here. The idea would be that you will be able to apply for a license or permit or both with 8 different agencies simultaneously using one portal. And we think we have the technology now to be able to do it, and we're excited about being able to accomplish that, which we think will attract more people to want to do business in the District of Columbia and keep people here who might go somewhere else. $1 million for revitalization of the Strand Theater. How many of you all are familiar with the Strand Theater? Probably most people in here. Strand Theater closed in 1959, and yes, it's still standing. Of course, there's a tree growing through the roof at this point. We're putting $1 million in there now to be able to stabilize the building, and the idea is to try to attract, especially when we go to the International Shopping Center Convention this year, to attract retailers who will want to be able to use that building. It's over on the north end of Ward 7. And then we're going to continue to invest money in Walter Reed, the shops at Dakota Crossing, which is where the Costco is located. There's a Lowe's that's going to be developed there as well. Skyland Town Center, which the groundbreaking for which is now taking place on the St. Elizabeth's campus. And we had a great event over there on Saturday. Broccoli City was there. There were an estimated, where's Keith? About 5,000 people? 5,000 people who were there. It looked like about 5,000 people there because I was there as well. And it looked like about 5,000 people on the campus. And then, of course, we've had the groundbreaking for the Southwest Waterfront also, and work has already started there. The fourth area, the fourth of the 4 pillars, is improve the quality of life for all people. And certainly, Dr. Thompson, that would include paying full attention to becoming as age-friendly as we possibly can for our seniors. Putting $2 million more into our wellness centers, almost $500,000 additional invested in our community supplemental food program, and then almost more than doubling the transportation services, right? That will go from $2.4 million to north of $6 million. That will allow us to be able to make sure seniors get out and about in ways that they haven't been able to do heretofore. In terms of health, we are proposing to invest $300 million, Dr. Garcia, in a new hospital. I saw Wayne come in. Where's Wayne? Oh, there he is. Okay. Wayne is our healthcare finance director. We're proposing to invest $300 million in the construction over the next 4 or 5 years in the construction of a new United Medical Center, which currently is located on the grounds right off of Southern Avenue, located on the grounds of what used to be the Greater Southeast Hospital, and before that it was the K-Fritz Memorial Hospital. Now it's the United Medical Center. I want to make something absolutely clear, and that is we're not proposing to operate this hospital ourselves. We're trying to make sure that there continues to be a hospital on the east end of the District of Columbia. And if we are successful in being able to get someone to or build the hospital, the idea is to bring an operator in there who's experienced in running hospitals so that we will be able to say to the people on the east end of this city that however long people will need health care services, and that will be a long time in the District of Columbia, you can count on there being a hospital. We've opened 3 new clinics in the last 2.5 years, one in Anacostia, one down in Congress Heights in Bellevue, and then another in Parkside in Ward 7. So that will be a major step forward if we can get that done, and I'm hopeful that we can. We're proposing to invest another $2.5 million or $2.5 million in Medicaid programs because we don't cover transplants at present. This would allow us to cover transplants. And then additional dollars in our early and periodic screening and diagnosis and treatment program, as well as $600,000 in our infant mortality programs. Our infant mortality rate is down to, what, 7.4. That is down from what it used to be many years ago of 23. When I was the director of DHS, it was over 23 deaths per 1,000 live births. It is down now to 7.4, which is a huge drop, but we still have a ways to go. In Ward 7, it is about at the national average of 6. In Ward 8, it is still pretty high. It's double that, around 12. Yeah, that's right. I was going to mention that. And thank you, Doctor, for bringing that, Dr. Garcia, for bringing that program to us. The Clinton Global Initiative is helping us. They are committed, and this is their first domestic program, is that right? They've committed to assist the District of Columbia with the goal of getting our infant mortality rate down to 0. And that's not impossible because I think the 7.4 includes, I don't know, 69 or 70 deaths. So it's not impossible for us to do that. For those who don't know, the definition of infant mortality means a child who dies within the first year after birth. And whenever that happens, that becomes an infant mortality statistic. We're also investing additional money in our TANF program, the Temporary Assistance to Needy Family program. And the proposal is to provide increases in the grants that go to people based on the Consumer Price Index increase, which would be about 2 or 3% in fiscal years 15 and 16, and then increase the benefit by 46% overall, which would get us back to where, because there have been no increases in the grant since 1996, when welfare reform came along in the country. This would not go back and do anything retroactive, but at least it would get it up to at least where Maryland is and where we probably would have been, but for the fact that there were no adjustments provided in all of that time. And then starting in 2018 and forward, there would be a CPI adjustment every year. We're proposing to invest, we actually started this last year, $40 million in the parks in Noma, which would be parks that would be very nearby to here, and then investing almost $42 million, $43 million in libraries, the Southeast Library and the Southwest Library, which are here in Ward 6. This would allow us to fund also a police force of 4,000 officers. Some of you may have seen this propaganda that was going around at one point that said we had cut 400 police officers. We have not cut one police officer from the force the entire time we have been in office. You know, and just to be absolutely blunt, it was just a lie that somebody put out there and they put it in print. We had probably around 3,700 police officers when we started. We have over 4,000 police officers in the District of Columbia now. This will allow us to increase the access to justice legal assistance fund up to $4 million, about $200,000 being invested in a mobile library service for incarcerated citizens, about $300,000 that will allow us to achieve accreditation for our Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. We have been foreclosed from being able to do that over the last number of years because there was nothing wrong with the quality of the staff, and certainly not the chief medical examiner. There's just a set of rules that foreclosed her because she hadn't applied within a specific period of time from being able to be certified and be able to be a part of an accredited Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. We have now a new chief medical examiner as of February, and we believe we now can qualify, I'm sure we can qualify for certification. It also will allow us to put $91 million into our fire and emergency medical services, continue to upgrade our fire stations, invest more money in ambulances and fire engines and the like. And also to put $1.4 million into our Department of Forensic Sciences, which is still relatively new. On the public transportation front, will allow us to invest about $300 million in WMATA. That's our full cost for the District of Columbia, along with the other states that invest. $2 million to increase the school transit subsidy. $5 million for the circulator buses in the District of Columbia, and so on and so forth. And one of the biggest, I guess, takeaways for me is that we're investing $114 million in sidewalks, bicycle lanes, and pedestrian improvements in order to create more transportation options here in the District of Columbia. The government operations, we already have started a new procurement system as a part of our procurement reform here in the District of Columbia. When will that start, Mr. Staten? Already? Yes. I didn't choke you on that question, did I?
It's a work in progress. And,
why don't you come on up and give us a quick, rundown on where we are with that?
Thank you, man. Good evening, everyone. It's a work in progress, and we're certainly moving along with some meetings we had to have, and we've held several meetings with the agency directors. And today we met with DDOE, and it was really interesting with what's coming down the pipe with DDOE, with the large-scale procurements that they're coming, and this is a good timing for the initiative we have underway in assigning procurement staff in the agency. So we're excited about it. Now, excited means, when are you going to do it? Well, we're in the process of notifying the directors who's coming to your office, and then we'll start that process and have everyone in place by mid-June. So we'll start that this month. As Director Baber said, you said it was going to be in April. And then she said, now you said it's May. Yes, we will start moving the people in May. So it seemed like to me the directors are excited. They ready. The directors are here, and I see smiles on their faces, so they're ready to get started, meaning they're ready to be held accountable for procurement. So that's the big smiles I see. So it's on its way, Mr. Mayor.
Is that why they're smiling?
That's why they're smiling, because they're going to be held accountable. I think that's what it is. But thank you so much for this vision. And we have worked extremely hard in getting this vision moving to improve the procurement system in the district, to give contracting officers an opportunity to learn the business. And we believe that that would make tremendous progress and, well, matter of fact, add to the bottom line for savings for those contracting officers coming to you to bring value to you as we, again, move forward with this new model of delegated procurement authority in the district's procurement operation.
Thank you, sir. We're also proposing to continue something that was really started for the first time this year, and that is the City Fund. That is a fund for nonprofits. And is allowing nonprofits to be able to apply for grants in order to keep any political influence out of it completely. The city fund, the innovation fund, City Innovation Fund, is being managed and administered by the Community Foundation. We put the money there. We establish what the priorities are, and those grant applications are being administered, received, decisions being made, all by the Community Foundation. What's amazing is we just had the first grants that were awarded last week. We had 315 organizations that applied for grants for a total of $30 million of applications, and there was an award of $3.9 million made, which means I think we had 58 or 60 organizations that got awards. So if anything, if nothing else, it certainly underscores the need that is evident in the District of Columbia to be able to support additional services being provided in the city. We're also putting $1.5 million into additional summer programs for the Department of Parks and Recreation. We are proposing to do more for legislative autonomy and budget autonomy for the city. We're funding for the first time a director of the Statehood Commission and an additional $100,000 to go into the statehood delegation to be able to support those efforts. We are putting some additional money into the Tax Revision Commission. Recommendations. You may have seen Mayor Williams' letter over the weekend in which he suggested that we should have done more. And those are choices that we had to make. We had a choice to provide tax relief to a greater extent, or to try to fund two of the areas that we thought were most important, and that is public education and affordable housing for the people here in the District of Columbia. So what we are funding or proposing to fund is a new tax bracket for people who make $40,000 to $60,000. Their tax bracket would go from 8.5% down to 7.5%. It would include a number of other things as well, and that is a unified approach to taxing tobacco products and a number of other things which I won't spend any time on. The last thing I'll mention is, and then we'll open it up for any questions that anybody may have, and that is, as well as we have done over the past several years, there's still things that we cannot fund. And so we've set up, I guess we call it the wish list, the revenue priority list, whatever you wish to call it, to say if we get more money, and I guess that's possible, right, Jeff? That we would know at some stage, who knows whether we will or we won't. But let's set up a priority list to say, here's how we will fund these things if we get more money in the current year, or in fiscal year 15. $8 million additional for infant and toddler slots would allow us to increase those by 200. $10.8 million in earned income tax credit benefits. $10.4 million in business franchise tax relief. $10.2 million in commercial property tax relief, putting $10 million into the University of the District of Columbia, and so on and so forth. And they all are ordered, at least in terms of our priority listing. There's, I think, about 20 of these. And it's a variety of things, you know, additional services, additional tax reduction, a mayor's scholarship program for $8.5 million, which is number 13 on the list, and so on and so forth. So that is the budget. That's where we stand at this. How much is the total of this wish list, Eric? $125 million. Yeah, no chance we'll get that additional money, I'm sure, for the current fiscal year. Maybe we will, but unlikely. Or for next fiscal year, I guess the issue is. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Who knows? What was that? Okay. Keep hope alive. Anyway, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Niger from ANC 6E.
We know. How are you?
Hi. What is the Youth Re-Engagement Center? Is that something that's already here, or is it going to be a new one? Or I don't understand what
It's going to. I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor Smith if she would come up and give you the details on that. That is something new for us.
And then why are we spending money on it?
Because it's a good thing.
Good evening. The Youth Re-Engagement Center, as the mayor said, is a new program that we're just in the process of developing. We're going to be launching it housing it in the Department of Employment Services. And the idea is for young people targeted at ages 16 to 24 who've become disengaged from school and are in many cases not engaged with work either, to reconnect them to educational opportunities to ensure that they get back into school or get their GED so that they're set up for success. So it will be both credit recovery for students who need to earn additional credits, connecting students to educational programs that they may not be aware of, and generally trying to set them back up on a path for success.
I assume that answers the question too of why we're spending money on it, because you know, you find so much social pathology associated with young people, you know, in that age range, you know, because they've dropped out of school, they're truant, they have all kinds of challenges. They're not working, they can't find a job, they may be undereducated, et cetera. So it's yet another effort to try to reach out to them and get them constructively engaged in something in the city, presumably workforce development. You know what, I'm going to ask, since Deputy Mayor Smith was up here, I'm going to ask her if she would talk a little bit about the boundary process, which I know is of interest to lots of people, the school boundaries and that process which will be going on for the next several months, right, if not longer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I recognize a number of you who've been out at meetings related to the boundaries, so I know that there are certainly some people here who have already been very engaged, which I appreciate. We are about halfway through what is going to be a year-long process to look at student assignment policy and boundaries in D.C. So the last time we as a city engaged in a comprehensive review and revision of boundaries across the city was 1968. So it's been a long time since we've done it in a comprehensive way, and we've made lots of changes during that time to accommodate new schools and schools that have closed and changes in population and so on, but we've done it in a way that's created kind of a tangled mess of boundaries and feeder patterns in the city, and a number of challenges we're working to address. So, as many of you all know, we've been going through a process of engaging the community, working with an advisory committee that's been shepherding this throughout this whole process to look at what the range of student assignment policies are that we can consider for DCPS, and then also what the boundaries and feeder patterns might look like within those policies. So we did a round of meetings at the beginning of this month. We've got another round coming up at the end of this month. And I encourage people to learn more about the process. You can sign on to the Deputy Mayor for Education's website, dme.dc.gov. There's an immense amount of information and data on there. And we will continue to have meetings in communities to hear feedback on some of our initial proposals, to continue to revise our thinking, and ultimately to have a final plan that will be rolled out in September, with the understanding that nothing would go into effect until at the earliest the 2015-16 15-16 school year, and we would expect a lot of grandfathering in whatever those plans are, both in terms of grandfathering for individual students to ensure that they've got some stability in their path, but also phasing in of some policies that we won't be able to phase in all at once. So the big message is there's lots of opportunities to get involved. There are initial proposals on the table, but they're at the proposal stage. So we need feedback. We've gotten a lot, which is great, but we will continue to collect more feedback and input on how we can revise those proposals and hone them until we end up with a single plan in September.
Yes, we got one here and one back there. Pass it to Mike, Darrell. Thank you.
So I have two questions. The first question is about efficiency. So we talk a lot about what the budget is including as far as like current service level for some of the projects that were funded last year. So can you talk about how the process looked at any efficiencies or any improvements, or are there things that we're going to stop doing because we found better ways to do them or improve upon them? Were there any savings that we found and reinvested in other areas? That's the first question. And the second question is around the $60 million, I think that's being added through the UPSFF and the adequacy work, the adequacy study. And so the question around the infusion of the additional dollars is, have we looked at, I guess, have we thought about how we plan on monitoring or evaluating the success of infusing additional dollars?
You mean on schools?
Yes.
Yes, let me ask our budget director to come up and answer your first question, which was an excellent question, because that is one of the exercises that we go through initially, and that is not just simply accepting what was last year, but looking intensively at whether those services should be continued or not. That is really the first exercise we go through. And then on the adequacy study, we'll ask the deputy mayor to come back up and talk about how we're spending that $60 million.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Every year when we put the current services funding level budget together, which is our baseline budget, before that we do a top-to-bottom review of what we had the year before. Now, I'll just go through a couple areas where the mayor's been able to generate savings working with his agency directors. The first person is sitting right next to you, what we'll call Brenda Donnell. The CFSA has had remarkable success in terms of the efficiencies Brenda's been able to put in place by bringing the population of kids in foster care down. Now, each year we take a reduction. That population going down is reflected in our baseline budget, but those are savings that she works around year-round to generate. So we're not just comfortable to put last year's budget in there. We look to see what progress Brenda has made and what continued progress she's projecting into the next year's budget, and then we reflect those savings as part of our budget. One other area I would like to mention is non-public tuition. There's a number of other ones we can go into after this. Non-public tuition, as soon as the mayor came on board, he said, we've got to take care of this situation where we were spending $160 million a year to educate children with special needs outside of the public education system of the District of Columbia. So the mayor did two things. First thing he did is made sure that every capital budget in the District of Columbia had funds when Brian Hamlin was going to reconstruct a school for inclusive classrooms, so that as schools were modernized, funding would be put in place to make sure that kids with those needs could be educated in a neighborhood setting. The second thing he did is increase the weights for both public schools and charter schools to receive students with special needs. There's a level 1 through level 4 of severity of need. The mayor increased all 4 levels up to what the appropriate cost of each child would be, and that encouraged both our public schools and our charter schools to reach out and try to encourage kids to come back into our education system. That started out at $160 million. We've seen savings every year, and now I think we're down to just over $70 million. So it's an incredible turnaround, and those kids are not being cut out of it. They're receiving education in their community schools, as they should.
Let me just add one more thing, which is a different way to look at efficiencies to me, and that is the investment in early childhood education. We have so many of our children who, it's been said they lost by the 3rd grade. We've got lots of children who lost by the time they get to kindergarten because they haven't had that kind of developmental input. So I see it as an efficiency in terms of making that investment early enough so that we don't wind up having to spend more money on kids who are truant because they aren't truant, or spending more money on kids who wind up in special education or in juvenile justice programs. So we'll be able to measure that over time. One of the things that we're looking at, we just had a big meeting about it last week, something called social impact bonds, to try to focus on getting investors, the typical traditional kind of investors, to invest in our case, in teen pregnancy prevention. If you look at teen pregnancy has tentacles in almost every area of expenditures in terms of social services, especially TANF, the TANF meaning the welfare supports, food stamps, Medicaid. You look at the number of young people who are in the homeless families population, and half of those families, by the way, are between the ages, the head of household, for want of a better way of putting it, is between, half of them are between 18 and 24 years of age, and they were teen parents. So being able to prevent situations like that, or to prevent them as a result of the kinds of investments that we're trying to make at this stage, will achieve efficiencies also that wouldn't normally be looked at as an efficiency. It means we won't spend money in the way that we used to spend it because we're doing things in a different kind of way. You want to talk about the adequacy study, Abby? It's $60 million going into the adequacy study. That the study itself went on for more than a year before we got to this stage.
So we spent, as the mayor said, over a year working with lots of folks within the education community locally and national experts building this adequacy study, which looked at what does it cost to provide an adequate education for students within our context here in DC. So given our standards for what students are supposed to know and be able to do, the new Common Core State standards, 21st century technology standards, and what the particular needs are of our student population. And through that, built out a new student formula that includes this at-risk weight, which the mayor referred to. And the idea is that there are certain kids, by virtue of what they are bringing to school, given their contextual background, so our at-risk weight includes students who qualify for TANF or for SNAP, homeless students, foster students, and then also students in high school who are overage for high school. And the idea is that although not every child who meets those qualifications has any particular needs in school, that it's a reasonable proxy for additional resources that can support effectively serving those kids. And so the at-risk weight is then applied for any student who meets any of those characteristics, and provides additional funding to be able to do the kinds of interventions, both academic and social interventions, that can put those kids on a path to success. So you asked a question about accountability for funds, and it's a good question, because one of the things, as the mayor talked about, we look at how can we invest our education funds in ways that we think are essentially going to be good long-term returns on investment. So early childhood is a really important piece of that. Another piece of it is ensuring that kids who've got any kind of particular needs, who are at risk of academic failure, that we support them with additional resources. So the fairest and most equitable way to serve kids is to provide the kinds of resources that any particular kid needs based on their particular needs. So whether they have an IEP and have actual special education services being delivered to them, whether they're English language learners, and now whether they're students who are at risk of academic failure. So it's a significant new infusion of dollars, and one that DCPS and public charter schools are really focused on how they can ensure that they're using it in really wise ways that provide those additional interventions to catch kids up and make sure that they're on track for success.
Those are two really good questions, too, so thank you for asking those. Yes, sir, you have your hand up, and we got a couple more hands, so if you all want to queue up in the back, we'll be happy to hear from you, too.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My name is Kevin White. I'm a parent of a Watkins Elementary student, and we'll have two there next year. First, I want to thank you for the reprogramming dollars that you put forth for this fiscal year so that we could replace the 52-year-old windows at that building. As I'm sure you're aware, the 2008 Master Facilities Plan ranked 7 out of 10 major building systems as poor or inadequate at that building. So the windows will take care of one of those things, but there are many more. So my question one is about budget priorities. Watkins has a lot of needs. It's fully enrolled and it's overcrowded. Meanwhile, Spingarn, which was slated for $65 million in FY12 and then recently closed last year, is back on the table for a 2-year investment of $65 million. And as you also know, there are many newly remodeled and renovated high schools that are under capacity with a lot of empty seats. So my budget priority question is why 540 students at Watkins Elementary have to wait while the district renovates yet another high school that will be under-enrolled.
Yeah, let me start with Spingarn. Spingarn will be a career and technical education school, and that's why it's being invested in. There's a lot of transportation work that's going on, as you know, right on 8th Street. And the idea is to create a high school that will help keep some of our kids in school and bring some of them back. It would be a career and technical education high school that would focus on transportation occupations because the first car barn in the city will be located right there at Spingarn High School, as well as healthcare occupations as well. You know, we've invested a lot of money, probably close to $2 billion now in schools, and we get this question all the time: why this and not that? You know, why that and not the other? And you make the best choices you possibly can based on what the needs are. We've tried to spread the money around as much as we possibly can, but at the end of the day, as long as you have more needs than there are resources, there are going to be some folks who will make, and sometimes a very credible argument, that you know, money should have been invested a little bit differently. I'm glad that we were able to invest the money in the windows. That's not the end of Watkins, right, Brian?
That's correct. Yeah. Thanks, Mr. There's not a whole lot left for me to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, if you go back in time to 2007 and 8, which is really the beginning of the current era of school modernization, there were schools back then across the city that had gaping need, and I walked through many of them and saw holes in the floor in the bathroom where the toilet used to be, or you could actually see skylight through roofs. And in those first couple of years, there were probably $700 or $800 million was spent in stabilization effort alone. And so in doing that, the schools were all, in a sense, brought up to a level of performance where the facilities teams could actually keep them running, keep the boilers going, keep the cooling systems going. And I think just by definition, all those schools that have yet to be touched or fully modernized are those that have the most current need. And so I recognize that Watkins, when you compare it to a school that's received a phase 1, I know it's frustrating and I know it's hard to walk into a recently modernized school, even if it's just a phase 1, and to look at that and to think, you know, I want my children to have that. And I was asked the other day in my budget hearing, you know, what do you say to parents? And I think the best answer is as the mayor just said, there's more need than there are resources to address. And if I could wave a wand, we'd do it all at once. We're going as fast as we possibly can through the program. So, thank you.
I think that is a truthful and maybe not, to some not an entirely acceptable answer. But I would say this: if you look at our schools today, by comparison, say to 2007 and 2008, we have come light years. Somebody was complaining to me about some high school stadium facilities. I said, "Come on, man, go to any other city and look at the high school stadium facilities in any other city." We don't have to take a back seat to anybody's high school stadium facilities at this stage. And the day will come when we will be rounding the corner to go back then and see, where it is that we need to go back and make additional changes. Again, it's unfortunately a situation where how much money do you have that you can spend, and then what is the level of need? Again, we've spent probably, $2 billion already on school modernizations, and that will continue into the foreseeable future. until we've reached every school. Tony.
So, Mayor Gray, thanks for coming here tonight. Have a few questions and comments. One, thank you so much for continuing to fund the parks system in Noma. It's a very important priority for us. You know, one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in the city, and that'll be very important for them. To continue that growth, though, there's a lot of new kids in the neighborhood. J.O. Wilson has the third largest early childhood program in the city, has a very large special ed population, and they've had students leave because there's no elevators, and you have to go up steps to get into the front door. And the modernization for J.O. Wilson slipped from FY17 to 20, with the projected cost dropping from $17 million to $13 million. And I know there's a lot of budget priorities, and it's hard to determine what to do. And if that school can't get everything and be the most beautiful school there is, I think that's something the community could accept if at a minimum we could get some of those essential ADA enhancements and some other minor upgrades to specifically remodel some of the rooms to meet the growing population.
Let me ask Brian to address part of your question. If I gave an answer, it probably would be virtually identical to the one that I gave previously, and that is, we inevitably wind up with X level of needs and Y level of resources, where Y is typically not at the point, where X is. It's an excruciatingly painful process where, you're constantly moving things around in order to try to get to an answer that will be acceptable to people. And frankly, if we were to say, okay, we'll take it from X and Y and Z and Q and P, then those folks would be after us as well. And I don't have a problem with the advocacy. It's good advocacy. But I hope that along the way there is an appreciation for the very difficult decisions that have to be made, when you have such a finite level of resources.
Yeah, certainly. I'm just hoping that we could get some of those critical ADA enhancements in particular.
Right, and well, thank you for the question. And I actually I don't have it with me tonight, but I have a list of the current ADA projects that we're prioritizing. We had, I think, about about $1.5 million in the budget, and then we're able to enhance that with an additional $4+ million. So we've got a series of school and park projects where we're going through and making sure that we address the most egregious ADA issues that there are. And I'll make sure maybe we can chat just afterwards and make sure that I've got in my mind what it is you're referring to. But we're doing things like, at Banneker or at Simon Elementary School, we're going to be putting in elevators so that the children that are disabled or people that are disabled can actually go from floor to floor. So those are the sorts of things that we're prioritizing and working through.
Thank you. And I have one other quick little question. There's about $5 million in the budget for reducing homelessness with veterans. Is that for 1005 North Capitol?
No, it's for people who are on the street. I don't know that we've selected the housing yet, but as I indicated earlier, we've made a commitment to try to eliminate homelessness among veterans by the end of 2015. Our best guess is that we have between 250 and 300 veterans who are still on the streets, but I can absolutely assure you that that would not be one place that would be selected. It may well be in the form of vouchers. It may well be in a number of different apartment units, but I personally don't believe in that kind of congregate, living for folks, because I think that inevitably leads to other kinds of problems. So I can assure you, while I don't know all the addresses, it absolutely is not one address that would be used to house those folks.
There is a project proposed right there at North Capitol Northeast that It's a 120-unit building. I know it's been applying for funds, and ANC 60 is in support of that. You know, it's
Is in support of it?
yeah. I mean, it's 120 units. 60
Yeah.
of them would be for homeless veterans, and I mean, I think it's an appropriate location.
It could
in our
be.
community.
It could be that it would make sense if it's for homeless veterans that it would include some of the people. But, you know, again, if we had a place for 250 or 300 homeless folks, or 250 or 300 folks, I don't think we would try to put all the homeless veterans in one place, because I just don't think that's a good idea. So that's good news to know that there's a place for 60 there, and we're putting the money in, so that will be an opportunity to serve a substantial percentage of those who remain homeless on the streets. You're welcome. Any other? Yes.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I'm hoping someone is here who could address an issue of the parking meters where you get your ticket from. Every parking meter, or we'll say many parking meters don't work. They don't take your money. They won't take your credit card. You go to another parking meter and the same thing happens. And sometimes you go to another meter and it won't happen, or it will happen. And so it's very frustrating, especially when, I go out to Virginia and all of the parking meters in Virginia work in perfect working order. And then in the district, it's just, a constant headache. Thank you.
We'll try to answer that. Matt Brown is with DDOT. I'm waiting for the meeting that I go to when somebody says, you know what, the district has got the best of something. I mean, I go to me, I went to North Dakota, and North Dakota had the best, snowball in the world.
Thanks. We've been doing a lot of work to get our parking meters in working order. We've installed multi-space meters. We've also tried to expand the options available to payers, pay by cell. We know that there are still parking meters that are out there that are broken. The best thing to do, I can speak to you afterwards to get the exact location, but the best thing to do if you find a parking meter that isn't working is to call 311 and report it. Absolutely. I'd be happy to. Sure. I'd be happy to speak to you afterwards. Thanks.
And I promise you we'll follow up. People were kind of after us about potholes. I said, did you notice we had some snow this winter? We had 28 snow events that the chemicals that we used to get the snow off the street actually helped to create the potholes. So we've 5,000 since we launched Pothole Palooza. Okay, thank you very much, Matt. 5,000. So our streets are getting back to good condition at this stage. We've got a lot of paving that's planned as well for the paving season, which was just launched. But I thought our folks did a pretty good job of getting the snow off the street. There was nobody that I heard any real complaints from about the snow. But the snow and the chemicals that we have to use to make sure the snow melts does create problems for our pavement, and then we can't pave it, of course, until streets dry up. So again, we had 28 events, and Matt Brown was the person that was just up here, and we'll make sure that he gets to you before you go. And if you can give us the addresses, we'll do our best to get it fixed right away. Yes.
Hi there. My name is Beth Bacon. I'm a parent at the Capitol Hill Cluster School here in Ward 6. I'm on the LSAT and part of the Capitol Hill Public School Parents Organizations, and we were following closely the adequacy study and the Fair Funding Act, and to Deputy Mayor Smith's comment about the adequacy study and the extra money in the budget around that for the at-risk kids. I just wanted to make an observation. At the Capitol Cluster School, our middle school, Stuart Hobson, is about 57% farm eligible, and Watkins is about 38% farm eligible, which would be a proxy for these at-risk weights, even though I know they're not exactly to the new weights. So we were anticipating we would get an infusion of money for our at-risk kids, but when we saw the budget, there was no specific allocation for those at-risk kids and no accounting of our at-risk kids according to the new weight. So we didn't see that money followed the kids. I appreciate the new investments and the new initiatives. We saw money for social-emotional support, and we saw money for the 40 lowest performing. But I'd just like to ask for sort of greater transparency and accounting for where that at-risk money went, and if we can count on in the future that to better follow the kids so we at the school level can make decisions about how to support our kids.
It's a fair question. Let me ask the gentleman from DCPS. For the folks, identify yourself, and then I'll let you answer the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. My name is Chris Rankus. The Chancellor couldn't be here this evening. She asked me to come on her behalf. Yes, a great question, and it's one that we've heard about, which is the location of at-risk funding in DCPS school budgets. The easy answer for schools like Stewart Hobson, for schools like Jefferson, Elliott Hine, is that funding went towards supporting our new middle school initiatives. And so those initiatives included things like social-emotional supports, the opportunity to apply for extended day, additional guidance counselors for schools that didn't have them in the past, reading specialists. And so we're pretty excited about being able to put money behind those initiatives. In fact, for a school like Stewart Hobson, about 30% of the students qualified for at-risk funding. The money that we put in to the tune of about $500,000 is more than what the at-risk funding alone would have yielded. And so in our planning, the idea was that knowing the scope of the middle school need was that the at-risk alone would be insufficient. We in fact put money on top of the at-risk in order to fully fund these new programs that I mentioned.
Where do you find that in the budget? I mean, compared last year to this year, there's one position. That's the only increase.
For which school?
Stewart Hobson.
So Stewart Hobson had, like I said, received $500,000 in new funding. I'd be happy to go line by line through it with you. I can put on multiple positions. I mean, as a ward, Ward 6 is up almost 12% in its budget compared to last year. We're looking at hiring almost 45 new teachers. I think that it's actually a really exciting time for the ward as a whole. Thank you.
Can you leave your name and contact information with Chris, and I'll see that he gets back to you ASAP within the next 24 hours to try to answer your question. Okay. Are there any? Yes, sure.
Talk to him about where the money for water.
Hold on one second.
Okay, great.
You want to talk to this gentleman too? Okay. All right. Any other questions before we adjourn? Thank you all very much for coming out, and we appreciate all the work you do to keep our city moving forward.